So hey, and welcome to finishing our refactoring. In this video we are going to finish our refactoring to our new architecture, and we will be in a position to have a nice clean basis to move forward with our new functionality. So I'll see you in there. Okay guys, so you guessed what we're doing in this video. We've done aiming without the tank, now we need to do firing without the tank. So I've slightly rejigged our architecture diagram. I've made this line here from the AI controller to the aiming component grey again because, well, it's now like that. And this is what we need to do. We need to break these dependencies on the projectile and the barrel from the tank, and then we need to introduce this aiming component to tank dependency, basically moving all our code out the tank. And I'm going to put you straight into the challenge. Fire without the tank. Move all the remaining firing code out of the tank. Yes, the tank will end up with no useful code, to the point that we could delete the tank class. But we're not going to, because we're probably going to need it later. And deleting classes is a hassle in Unreal. Respecify your projectile in the blueprint. There's a hint for you. Let me just show you what I mean by that. So if we go to the tank blueprint at the moment, you're going to be moving this bit here where we specify the projectile blueprint. You're going to be moving it to the tank aiming component, and it will be broken. So remember to respecify that. Remember to also rebind the firing in the blueprint. The firing input mapping goes to the tank at the moment. It's going to go straight to the aiming component, and good luck. Okie dokie, let's roll up our virtual sleeves, or even our real sleeves, and get our hands dirty with this puppy. I'm going to right click and close all but the aiming component. In fact, I'm going to close everything, and I'm going to get my workspace how I want it for this work. I want the tank open, then the tank CPP, then I want the tank aiming component header file, and then I want the tank aiming component CPP. Why? Because I have some sort of OCD. Okay, let's go to the tank, and let's take a look. We have no includes that we don't want in the tank. That's good news. We have a barrel and a projectile in the tank. Do we want them? Well, let's look at our target architecture. No, we don't. So let's delete them. We don't need those forward declarations anymore. Great. Okay, do we want a fire method on the tank? Uh-oh, no we don't. So let's cut the fire method off the tank and put it in the tank aiming component. Now, ask yourself, does it make sense for the tank aiming component to have a public blueprint callable firing method? I think it does. That makes a lot of sense. We're going to need to remap our input. In fact, as we've broken it, let's do half of the input remapping right away, which is we might as well break this link. We're not calling fire on the tank anymore. We're going to be calling it on the aiming component. So that's that. Now, that means we don't even need a public interface in the tank, although there's no harm in leaving it there. The constructor will leave. The begin play will leave. Now, all of this stuff. What do we have? We have a projectile blueprint, a launch speed, reload time, a barrel pointer, and a last fire time. Let's take all of that, although we're not going to need all of it, and paste it into the bottom of the tank aiming component. Now, a couple of things. Firstly, we already had a to-do to remove this barrel. We don't need it. Look, there's a barrel above, so we don't need to. Let's get rid of that. I like to have my methods at the top, so, oops, what did I just do? Cut that, that's right, sorry. I like to have my methods at the top, so move barrel towards, I'm going to put here. Under the constructor, any other methods? No. Now this launch speed, you see it's here and it's here. We already had a to-do to remove it. Let's to-do that. Okay, so on the tank aiming component, what do we end up with? A constructor made private just because I have OCD about public interfaces. We have a protected firing state, we want that. We have a move barrel towards private helper method, that's fine. We have the barrel and the turret, makes loads of sense. We have a default launch speed, yep, that's fine. We have a projectile, right. It doesn't understand the class A projectile. Do we want it to? Do we want a tank aiming component to depend on the projectile? Yes, it's that green arrow, we need to introduce it. So, what do? Well, we forward declare the projectile. So if we're adding it in the header file, we're probably going to want to add it in the C++ file. Do we use projectiles in the C++ file anywhere? Pretty sure we do. Can't see it at a glance. Let's just search for projectile in the current document. Looks like we actually don't. We only need it in the forward declaration. That's a bit strange. I think that we probably are going to need it. Where do we use it in the header file? in the projectile blueprint? We don't actually. In this case, we only need it in the header file because we're just dealing with a blueprint. So I'm probably going to end up changing this line to a dotted line effectively. But let's carry on. So here we go. We've got these three. We've got all that stuff. Let's go to the CPP and see what needs to happen here. Not very clear to me looking at it what needs to happen now. It's all a little bit confused. So what I'm going to do is use the compiler to help me. I could go through carefully and reason about it, but of course the compiler's here to check these dependencies for us. So this is a good time to flip back over and hit compile. Now remember, as in the previous video, if you're not sure, go to GitHub. It's linked in the resources and find out what code changes I'm making. Okay, so the tank. Fire is not a member of a tank. So that's a very simple thing. That's because we need to take the fire method out of the tank and put it in the tank aiming component. There it is. So I deleted it in the header file. Remember, you do that when you move a method from one class to another. Remember to re-annotate like this. Okie dokie, that's cool. What else is in the CPP? Just the begin play stuff. Now, by the way, this begin play needed for the blueprint begin play to run. That's true, but if you were to take out the method altogether and not override it, then that wouldn't be the case. So for the sake of less lines of code, why don't we just do that? We pretty much need no code whatsoever in our tank, by the way. We can pretty much just take all of this stuff out, maybe just leave the constructor there, take all of this, even the begin play, just to prove the point. And all we're doing in the constructor is stopping the tank itself from ticking just for performance purposes. Why does it need to tick? It's just a placeholder for the moment. So that's the tank is stripped down to absolutely nothing, which is quite fun. Okay, cool. Aiming component is probably in a better state. Let's use the compiler to tell. Would you do this on a bigger project? Possibly. The compiler's pretty good at only compiling the stuff it needs to, so there's no harm in using the compiler to work out what your next port of call is with your refactor. It's not kind of lazy or cheating, I don't think. It's fine to just say, okay, let's kind of check in and see where we need to go. So use of undefined type a projectile in tank aiming component. So we actually did need the projectile. I thought we didn't. I missed this when I saw it. So we, of course, do need to hash include the projectile. Wicked. Okay. Now, there's somewhere else. Before I even move on, I've just realized there's somewhere else that's bound not to work, which is that the tank player controller, what does it do when we fire? Well, we don't. Remember, we fire directly from input binding. So we can't do anything there until it compiles because it won't appear in the blueprint. We can't go in and connect that up yet. How about the tank AI controller? Well, that doesn't fire yet, and that's okay. We weren't firing before we started this moving of the firing code into here. So we don't need to fix it yet, not till we're compiling. Not till we're compiling. Let's get it compiling. So I think we're good to try recompiling again. And it'll be a pretty simple job, I think, to get the AI tank compiling. And even getting us firing should be relatively simple as well. So let's see. Compile complete. Brilliant. What happens if we play? Well, we can aim. I can't fire. Not surprising. Let's go bind the input. On the tank. Now, the way you do this is you take the tank aiming component, give yourself a bit more space maybe. Actually, also ask the question, is this comment block reasonable? Aim input binding? It's really firing or ballistics. Input binding. Keep everything up to date. Keep your comments up to date. They're bad enough that they don't keep themselves up to date. Come off the aiming component and say fire. Because it's the right type of annotation on there, you can do it. When you press the key, you fire straight into the aiming component. Let's try it. Now, why did that crash? I don't have a particularly good reason why that crashed. We made a change to a blueprint. Unreal gets a bit touchy about that sometimes. I'm not too worried that that crash is there. It's why we save regularly. You get back to your tank blueprint and you just swear a little bit under your breath and try again. So there's an error on that. Are we compiled? It is important we're compiled. Tank aiming reference comes in. Fire comes in. Now this is why it's a good habit actually when you do this to compile your blueprint and then save it. Or you could go to File and Save All here. Now let's try playing. Can I fire? Oh, interesting. Hard crash when I try and fire. Why would that be? In the tank player controller? No, it doesn't happen there, so it would be in the tank aiming component, which we really need to rename to ballistics component at some point. Is there any reason? Are we not protecting something? So if not ensure barrel, we need a barrel to fire. That's true. The projectile blueprint, haha, the thing I told you to make sure. So, by the way, look, this projectile blueprint, we need to have that projectile blueprint there in order for this to work. In fact, for firing to work at all, we need a projectile blueprint. So we'd better say, if not ensure barrel and projectile blueprint, yeah, that would save that crash for us. So I'll recompile. While I'm recompiling, let's pop into the tank. Let's go to the, what am I going to? Not the tank itself, it's not on there anymore, it's on the tank aiming component, and it's here, projectile blueprint under the setup section, projectile blueprint. Did even warn you about that, and I made the mistake myself, but I have put the relevant ensure in place now to prevent the hard crash from happening in that instance again. Play. Now, can I fire? Yes, I can. I can fire, and then I wait 3 seconds, and I can fire again. Cool. Now we just need to fix the AI tanks. We are very, very nearly there. Tank AI controller.supup. To do fixed tank firing, limit the firing rate. We'll leave that as the thing. It's not the control tank that fires, it is the aiming component. I think it's pretty much as simple as that, actually. We've done all the other work. Let's go and see. Compile our code, and then hopefully we are there. Okay, let's see if this works. I'm firing, they're firing. I'll F11 it. Yep, they're firing every 3 seconds. Good. We are operating on the new we are operating on the new architecture. That is fantastic news. So let's go to our architecture diagram. What have we done? We've got rid of the tank dependencies from the tank altogether. We're in this state. In fact, the tank is basically completely sidelined and irrelevant right now. I'm just going to whip through in the next minute or two and just check that this is actually the dependency map we have. So let's just go back to where we started with all this and whip through the dependencies and just make sure that we've got exactly what we hope to have. So I'm going to reopen Visual Studio. The projectile should depend on nothing. It does. The tank should depend on nothing, actually. We can remove the includes from the tank. The AI controller should depend on only the aiming component. That's correct. The aiming component should depend on the projectile, the barrel, and the turret. Yep. The barrel should depend on nothing. Check. The tank movement component should only depend on the track. It's tangential to what we're doing with aiming, but we remember that that's true. The player controller should only depend on the aiming component. Yep. The track should depend on nothing, and the turret should depend on nothing. Look, awesome. If you really want to be thorough here, you can check that that same set of dependencies works in terms of your forward declaration. So I'm looking for the word class here. Should the AI controller have a forward declaration of tank? No, it doesn't need it, so let's do that, get rid of that. Should the aiming component have forward declarations for anything? It doesn't look like it needs them, or it wouldn't be compiling. Should the barrel, again, it doesn't have any. Yes, the movement component needs the track. Does the player controller need the aiming component? Yes. Does the track need anything? No, and it doesn't have anything, and neither does the turret. What a refactor. Let's do a final compile. Please remember that you can go to GitHub and you can look at the commit, which isn't showing on my screen yet because I haven't made the commit, but the previous one was, and that was your code changes. Just check it compiles. Play the game. I'm even going to turn my Xbox controller on. Just wait for it to warm up, and then I'm going to move away myself. Try and get away from these pesky enemy tanks if I can. No, it needs a replay. Here we go. Now I can move and I can fire, and we're back in the position where we now got a chance of actually setting this UI to how we want it. All these physics problems, by the way, will be fixed on a future iteration of the game. So look, huge congratulations on getting this far. It was a lot of work to get to a new architecture. I hope you'll agree that our architecture is a lot cleaner than it used to be, a lot simpler to reason about. We understand a lot more about Unreal, which is the whole point of this course. And I will see you in the upcoming videos where we actually start to add new functionality on top of this new quality base that we have built.